Well, good morning to those friends on the East Coast. Very early good morning to our friends on the West Coast, and good evening to our friends joining us from Europe and overseas. My name is Carrie Davis. I am General Counsel and Vice President of the American Association of Port Authorities. Thank you very much for joining us today. When I woke, the chatter before we formally kick this off might have stole my line a little bit, but the very first headline that I read when I woke up this morning was about a potential presidential emergency on climate. So I don't think there's a better time for us to be having this conversation. The second headline I read, you might have heard us chatting about a minute ago, was from London. I had to look up the pronunciation, but it's Luton Airport. And the airport was closed because the tarmac melted. It's 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and tarmacs and supply chains are literally melting down in front of our eyes around the world. I'll give you one guess where the sustainable tarmac materials are being invented, like those at ports. And yes, it's in England because of what they're experiencing there. And those tarmac materials are made from traditional petrochemicals that sustain our lives. But one day, with programs like the one we're talking about, they'll be made from wholly renewable inputs. Allow me to say one more word about who you're about to hear from. So after I read those articles this morning, I looked up the definition of sustainable. And the definition I really liked is from the University of Rochester. It says sustainability is research, curricular, clinical, and outreach efforts, and playing a proactive and collaborative role in contributing to an environmentally healthy community. Ian Gansler, who you are about to hear from, my colleague at AAPA, is a top-notch policy researcher. He handles one of our best clinical technical committees in our industry, the Environment Committee. He puts policy to practice and he advocates for it. He also oversees the outreach and collaboration efforts like you're a part of today. Let's please give Ian a virtual round of applause and work together today for an environmentally healthy community.
Thank you, Carrie, for that introduction and for the opportunity to manage this program. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. And I just echo Carrie's thanks to those of you on the West Coast who are with us bright and early. We at AAPA are really excited to be launching the Port Opportunities with Energy, Resilience, and Sustainability, or POWERS program. You can follow along today on Twitter by following us at Ports United and using the hashtag PortPowers. We have a really engaging slate of speakers for you today, and there will be an opportunity for questions and discussion at the end. I'd like to kick things off by introducing Mario Cordero. Mr. Cordero is the chairman of the AAPA Board of Directors and executive director of the Port of Long Beach. Prior to serving as executive director, Mr. Cordero received a presidential appointment to the Federal Maritime Commission in 2011, and he served as the chairman of the FMC from 2013 to 17. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining us today, especially from the West Coast. And please take it away and kick us off.
Well, thank you, Ian. And thank you, everyone, for joining this very important topic. I think Carrie Davis said it best, how timely it is for us to be discussing this ever important issue of energy, climate change, and all the related issues in the year 2022. We're starting to see what the impacts of that discussion have been. But using the cliche that many have used, particularly in these last couple of years, crisis brings an opportunity. So I'm very honored that as AAPA, we're now launching our official initiative, the POWERS Initiative, and that is the Port Opportunities with Energy, Resilience, and Sustainability Program. The past 2 years, with regard to port authorities and goods movement and supply chain, the thrust of the conversation has been the lack of resiliency in the supply chain. And of course, here at the Port of Long Beach, a containerized port, or port that's major mover in containerized cargo, we've also led for many years with regard to environmental sustainability. So this is a very important topic for the Port of Long Beach, and of course now for the AAPA. And as I mentioned, the challenges have been a lot of discussion at the national level about the supply chain, but just as important, it's not so much limited to the operations of port authorities, but also with regard to the whole issue of climate change, renewable energy, decarbonization, and how important that is for us to move as a nation in a sustainable fashion. We have a great opportunity here with regard to alternative fuels discussions that you will hear later this morning. For example, the opportunities for our American exporter, LNG. We know that in today's world, how important that source is, whether in the United States, in Europe, and throughout the world. So we have a great opportunity to maximize the American export of LNG fuel. Other fuels that are coming into play with regard to the whole question of decarbonization and moving towards a zero emission type of mindset is the oncoming of fuels like e-methanol, now being presented by Maersk, the #1 container carrier in the world, which has an objective by 2023 of moving forward with this alternative fuel. Renewable energy, a big topic for this nation today. And this is something that, again, we all recognize the lack of resilience of our grid throughout the United States. Very important for us not only to invest in the grid, but on the other hand, parallel to that, move forward with renewable projects. Many states in this nation have led with regard to the movement of renewable energy. Many people would be surprised to know that Texas is a big leader in renewable energy. And I say that only because from a California perspective, a lot of people talk about California and their leadership, but when it comes to renewable energy, the Midwest and states like Texas have led the way. And this is an important conversation that we need to have, again, to further move towards sustainability. So at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of discussion that's before us today with regard to not only renewable energy, decarbonization, alternative fuels, hydrogen, a big topic now in national discussion. So I look forward to, again, moving forward in 2022 with escalating the need for hydrogen fuel, among other possibilities in terms of alternative energy. So with that, I think for us at the AAPA, it is time to lead. And I think this association has been a very proud association with regard to the many topics that have been advocated with regard to the American Port Authorities. But just as important now is, of course, this whole issue with regard to energy resiliency. No matter what state you are from, energy resiliency is now a #1 item to be talking about here in the United States. So I'm glad to be part of this discussion with many leaders in the congressional level, and of course in this industry, and of course as an association of AAPA, moving forward to better escalate the whole question about sustainability. So last, I will say this. This will be an annual event now for AAPA, and we're gonna, as you hear this morning, we're launching the Powers Initiative. In January of 2023, we're gonna be meeting in Tampa, Florida, to have an annual discussion with regard to the Powers Initiative. So this is the beginning of great things of what we're going to do here at the AAPA. So with that, I want to conclude my comments in terms of what we all have in common. What we have in common is to move forward with the best interests of this nation with regard to energy security and environmental sustainability. So with that, Ian and everybody on the call, thank you so much for this opportunity to give this introductory remarks. And I look forward to hearing from our other leaders here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, and for your remarks and for helping us, through the board of directors in setting up this program. Next, I'd like to invite Chris Connor to say a few words. Chris Connor is the president and CEO of AAPA. He has 38 years of experience in international shipping and logistics prior to his work at AAPA, including a successful career with Wallenius Wilhelmsen. He has a long-standing reputation as an industry leader and globally recognized expert in deep sea ocean transport and land-based logistics. Chris?
Thanks, Ian, for that introduction, and welcome to all the virtual audience, including the impressive list of guest speakers who we'll hear from over the next 40 minutes or so. Over the last 6 months, as we began to shape the contours of what has now become the Powers program, we were driven, if not inspired, by the multi-dimensional role that ports play as regards energy distribution, the bunkering of ocean-going vessels, the shoreside powering of cargo and passenger vessels, and energy consumption in cargo operations. Ports throughout the country are laser focused on best serving the communities they live and work in, and Powers is designed to bolster the port community's ability to meet the twin challenges of energy security and climate change by advocating for federal policies to support American energy prowess, pragmatic decarbonization, technology for renewables, and environmental sustainability. As Ian mentioned, prior to joining AAPA, I was the chief executive of Wallenius Wilhelmsen, one of the world's largest car and ro-ro ocean carriers. In that capacity, I came to truly appreciate the importance of taking a leadership role on energy and environmental issues, such as WWL did in the shift away from heavy fuel oil to distillates in their deep sea operation. With that perspective in mind, in recognizing the multidimensional role that ports play with energy and the environment, I can see clearly that the twin challenges I referred to earlier will require both private sector know-how and government backing. Today is the formal beginning of what will be a robust and sustained effort on behalf of America's ports, the communities they operate in, and the country as a whole. One leading indicator of our efforts is the creation and funding of the new role now occupied by Ian Gansler, as Carrie mentioned a few minutes ago. Looking ahead, some key dates on our calendar are AAPA's annual convention and exposition in Orlando, October 16 through 19. This program will feature several sessions, workshops, and roundtables hosted by experts on the topics of energy, sustainability, and resiliency. There will also be demonstrations of new technology and product solutions vital to advancing environmental initiatives. These will be shown in the exhibit hall, which we're calling the Technology Theater, sponsored by Port Tampa Bay. And also, as Mario mentioned just a few minutes ago, the newly created Powers Summit and Exposition will take place January 24 through 26 in the new year, 2023. That will bring together port executives, energy leaders, environmental experts, and other key stakeholders for deep dive conversations on emerging sustainability solutions in the port industry. We hope to see you at at both or either of those events. Thank you for this opportunity. And Ian, back over to you.
Thank you, Chris. And Imani, my colleague, has just put in the chat box here links. You can register for both of those events. Congressman Weber, I see you votes were just called. If you have a minute, we're ready for you. We certainly understand if you have to go give votes, but I was going to give a lengthy introduction for you. In the interest of time, I'll skip over that and invite you to make your remarks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I do want to say I'm thrilled to be here on this momentous occasion of us getting together on this sports. I heard Carrie Davis say that the tarmacs are melting down because of how hot it is. And I know that was true because yesterday we got stranded on one and my bride was with me and she had a pretty good meltdown herself. So I do know that that's been happening. But I'm thrilled to be here as we advocate for federal policies to support American energy prowess, pragmatic decarbonization, technology for renewables, and environmental stability. Most of you all know that District 14 of Texas has more ports than any of the other all congressional districts in the country. And so we're loving to be here. I love what Mario said about the lack of resiliency. He went on to say that Texas was a big leader in renewable energy. Yes, we are. We're number one in wind energy, number two in renewables. And so I don't have to tell y'all that this is so important, the program that we're talking about, because it is ports are the lifeblood of our American economy. And I can assure you that with all those ports, it's the lifeblood of my district. So I could go on and on and on. I do want to just say thank you for all y'all are doing. I'm the fellow co-chair of the caucus. As you know, the Ports Caucus. Congressman Alan Lowenthal, as you very well know, is going to be retiring. We're going to miss him. We appreciate his input. He represented the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. But I am shirking with my duties as a reporter of the upper Gulf Coast of Texas if I don't share a little bit about the ports in Texas. Texas ports handle 616.2 million tons of cargo, foreign and domestic. They generate 449.6 billion of total economic value to Texas. Texas ports are a diverse economic engine impacting all sectors from energy and petrochemical industry to agriculture, retail, tourism, you name it. Cargoes that ship through Texas ports include petrochemicals, new and used automobiles, industrial machinery, retail electronics, agricultural products, steel products, and I could go on. Nations depend on their ports. It's extremely important for us. As co-chair of the Ports Caucus, I look forward to working with the AAPA to implement the Powers program for the benefit of our ports and the industries that they support. But more than that, the people, the jobs, the families that's behind this, what it does for national security, for balance of trade, and I could go on. And I recognize there are several planks to AAPA's Powers program, but I've got to say, I'm particularly impressed and glad to see the one on LNG. And I could go on and on about Russia and Europe and how you know they'd rather have LNG from the United States, particularly Texas. And I could wax eloquent, as the old saying goes, for way too long. But it's important what y'all do. I want to cut short my remarks because I do have to go vote. I do want to thank and ask Andrew Bauer to convey my thanks to Alan Lowenthal. I thank Andrew for his part in this as well. He's been a great nation. He's been a great state rep for our nation. Congressional rep for our nation in California. We're going to miss him. So I want to say thank you to all. Forgive me for being so brisk and so brief, but what's the 3 S's of the speech? Be succinct, be short, be seated. So with that, I will yield back, and I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Congressman Weber. We understand you have to go take votes, and those congressional schedules can be tricky. So thank you for taking some time this morning for us. And just a couple words about Congressman Weber for the audience. He is a 3rd-generation Texan representing the 14th District of Texas. The 14th District, as he said, is rich in ports with close proximity to several seaports, including the Port of Galveston, Port of Houston, Port of Beaumont, Port of Port Arthur, Port Freeport, and Port of Texas City. He is a member of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, where he serves on the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee, the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation Subcommittee, and the Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials Subcommittees. He is also the ranking member of the Energy Subcommittee of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, but most importantly, in my opinion at least, Congressman Weber is the co-chair of the Congressional Ports Caucus, which is a bipartisan coalition of members of Congress dedicated to port policy issues. We're so grateful that Congressman Weber was able to join us today and give such nice comments about the Powers program. And as the Congressman said, we're also delighted to have with us today Andrew Bauer, who is the legislative director for Congressman Alan Lowenthal of California's 47th District. Andrew has worked in the United States House of Representatives since 2013, primarily for Congressman Lowenthal, who serves on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the House Committee on Natural Resources. Congressman Lowenthal, along with Congressman Weber, is the co-chair of the Congressional Ports Caucus. And we want to extend our congratulations to Congressman Lowenthal on a spectacular career and wish him luck in retirement. We're so grateful, Andrew, for your work on the Ports Caucus. We've had several really great events throughout this Congress and hope to have a couple more before we close out the year. And especially in this Congress, when we've seen such historic levels of support from the federal government for ports. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Ian, Carrie, everyone at Team AAPA. It has been a pleasure to work with you all this time. And of course, thank you to Congressman Weber for his incredibly kind words. I know how much Congressman Lowenthal has appreciated their partnership as well. I'm incredibly honored to be joining you all on behalf of Congressman Lowenthal, who is regrettably busy chairing a hearing of the Energy and Mineral Resources Subcommittee. I am an admittedly poor substitute, so I will be very brief, but I will share the Congressman's strong enthusiasm for the Powers program. I can't speak enough to his interest in a multi-pronged approach to address some of the greatest challenges of our time, from climate change to energy insecurity. Addressing climate change, as I think many speakers have elaborated, makes our supply chains more secure, resilient, and efficient in the long term, and we cannot delay action. All of these challenges are deeply interrelated, and ports will be critical partners as we work to confront them. As many of you may know, Congressman Lowenthal recently introduced the Clean Shipping Act of 2022, which establishes a path to establish the first zero carbon fuel standard for the maritime sector, complementing the European Commission's Fit for 55 package of legislative proposals. Congressman Lowenthal is therefore extremely glad to see the AAPA playing a leadership role in supporting the deployment and development of the next generation of fuel infrastructure. Shore power and electrification are absolutely critical priorities for the Congressman as well. Nearly 40% of Americans live within 3 miles of a port, and it is critical that we do everything possible to reduce the environmental impact and public health impacts of goods movement. The Powers program is a critical step towards that goal. Deploying wind energy is going to be critical to supporting the overall electrification goal, to our carbon agenda, and to the development of domestic energy security and long-term job growth in communities around this country. We look forward to working with the APA and our local ports to do everything we can to build out that infrastructure. Policymakers in Congress and the administration understand the critical position of our nation's seaports better than ever. As we work to continue to bring down costs for American consumers and to ensure the robust flow of critical goods, we have to continue to use our voices to prepare for future shocks to the supply chain and to continue to increase resiliency. Congressman Lowenthal is proud to partner with the APA to work towards these vital objectives, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and please give our thanks as well to Congressman Lowenthal. So before introducing our remaining speakers, and we have some speakers who are going to speak on specific topics, specific policy issues in this program that I'm really excited for. But before getting to that, I'd love to say a few words about how excited I am to be manager of the Powers program and what I foresee working on in this position. America and the world face twin challenges: ensuring we have sufficient and affordable energy to power our economies, and decarbonizing our energy systems to avert the worst consequences of climate change. And these challenges are linked. We can't just ignore one to solve the other. So why should the port industry specifically have a program to address these challenges? Why not just leave it up to the government or other industries to address them? Because ports sit in a unique position as multimodal hubs. Maritime vessels, trucks, and rail all converge at ports. And AAPA ports all serve unique purposes in the economy, moving containerized cargo, bulk cargo, agriculture, energy, passengers, and more. Ports are uniquely positioned to host energy solutions for all modes of transportation. And with this wide range of vehicle and cargo types, ports can roll out innovative technologies to power the next generation of transportation, including electrification, liquefied natural gas, hydrogen, methanol, ammonia, biofuels, and others. I've had a really great time trying to wrap my head around. I don't have much of a chemistry background. I'm trying to, learn as much as I can about all these different fuels, and I'm really excited to learn even more from all of our members. And unlike other multimodal hubs, ports sit on the edge of our oceans and waterways. This creates unique economic opportunities for our nation, such as the export of liquefied natural gas to our allies abroad, especially as the war in Ukraine has created an energy crunch in Europe. As carriers, shippers, and consumers look to reduce emissions from maritime transportation, the United States can create an entirely new industry. We have the chance to make United States ports the world's hubs for alternative fuels. But ports' position on coasts also exposes our industry to unique threats. Rising sea levels, stronger storms, and dangerous heat waves all threaten the smooth operation of supply chains. The coronavirus pandemic has shown us that when supply chains don't run smoothly, it has cascading consequences for the entire economy. As climate change threatens to up the ante of supply chain disruption, it's critical that ports and the entire supply chain start preparing now. And it's critical that governments at all levels, supply chain partners, and consumers that benefit from ports every day know what it will take to ensure our ports are resilient. It's this overlap of opportunities and challenges that inspired AAPA to create the Powers Program, which is going to focus on 5 key policy areas. First, bolstering global energy availability through liquefied natural gas and other bridge fuels. Second, increasing alternative fuel domestic use and production. Third, enhancing electric infrastructure at ports. Fourth, strengthening energy and coastal resilience at ports. And fifth, building physical and human infrastructure for wind energy. So to talk about some of these policies, we've invited 4 AAPA members to speak about how they're addressing challenges at their ports and in their companies. While AAPA has 83 port authorities in the United States as our core membership, we have over 200 companies as members that either provide a service to ports or are customers of ports. Ports can't address any of these challenges alone. We're going to need the full collaboration of the public and private sectors. And next, so in the interest of his schedule, because I know he has a hard stop coming up, I'd like to introduce Jason Scher. Who is the Manager of Environmental Sustainability at the Prince Rupert Port Authority. While AAPA advocates for our American port authorities, we have 10 Canadian members, along with dozens more in the Caribbean, Central, and South America. We certainly have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to gain by collaborating. In that vein, Jason is going to speak about a study the Prince Rupert Port Authority has done to model the impact of climate change on their supply chains. Jason?
Thanks, Ian, for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to present today. I want to echo your comments around the collaboration between Canadian and American ports through AAPA's Sustainability Committee, but also through the Green Marine Program. Ian and I had a chance to connect in Montreal at the annual Green Tech Conference.
Whatever it's called.
And yeah, I thought that was a great conversation we had, Ian, and you know, I want to provide a abridged version of what I presented in Montreal last month. So to share my screen here, I just want to also say that I'm presenting from the traditional territory of the Tsimshian people. Oh, I think, Ian, you've got to allow screen sharing here. Ian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead and try now, Mr.
Oh.
Disher.
How's that look there?
Great.
Just want to acknowledge my colleague who worked on this project, Stephen Bourne from Atkins Global. So Stephen is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and has a great deal of experience with American ports, so was able to bring that experience to us here in Prince Rupert. Just a few shots of the Port of Prince Rupert, small but growing port on the northern coast of British Columbia, Canada, moving a variety of cargoes, including grain and coal, liquid propane, containers, wood pellets. We have a very busy, active cruise season this year again. Just a picture of an expansion of our container port. So we have growing infrastructure, need to understand potential climate change impacts today into the future, but also how does that impact our cargo, the resiliency around our cargo flows. So we've seen a number of severe impacts from weather in the last number of years. We sit along the Skeena River, and there's been a number of significant high river or flooding events. Huge storm in 2015 that did some damage to a ramp. We've also seen some abnormal temperatures in BC, which created a heat dome last year, which had the impact of burning up some rail corridors And also another significant event last November was an atmospheric river that ran through BC and damaged a significant part of our southern BC infrastructure, including rail and road networks. So we joined a project that was put forward by our Transport Canada group. It's called the Transportation Asset Risk Assessment. And ideally, it's a climate change risk assessment. So we wanted to look at how it impacted both infrastructure, but also cargo flows. This is just how we laid out the project over 2.5 years. And the key point here is that we created some working groups, both internally with members across the Prince Rupert Port Authority, engineers, our accounting team, environmental scientists, but we also created a working group with our partners, our terminal operators, government agencies, our First Nation partners, to really come together around this project. We want to understand potential climate change impacts across the entire supply chain. This is just a snapshot of container ship leaving China, coming across the Pacific, and then the rail network into the US and Eastern Canada. So ideally, the Seaport Simulator is an Esri ArcMap extension developed by Atkins and SNC-Lavalin. We use this to assess port efficiency and resiliency, impacts of the global supply chain, and potential mitigation and adaptation measures moving forward. Busy slide here, but this is the brains behind the simulation. Each of the orange points is a decision point where we need to decide if climate change is going to have an impact, and if so, how. It's broken into those sort of 3 areas. The oceanic version, voyage of the vessel, impacts around the port, things like sea level rise, wind and rain, and the continental piece around rail. Typically, mostly concentrated on extreme temperatures. So we created a digital twin. This is simulating storms at the Pacific. I'm just going to give a real quick rundown. We did a great deal of investigation around the port territory, including collection of LiDAR data and 3D mapping of all of our assets. With that, we used the tool to understand where there may be inundation from sea level rise. Also looking at projected sea level rise into the future with gathering of tide data, looking at future projections, and a great deal of modeling. Again, looked at the hydrodynamics around the port, including wind-driven effects to understand what are we looking at down the road. Wind, we learned, is going to be a huge factor in port operations. We're already starting to see extremely high winds in the summer months, not typical, but we did a lot of projections around how is wind going to affect our terminal operations. And this continental piece around extreme temperatures, we're already seeing, yesterday and today, impacts of extreme weather and heat in England. So buckling of rail and bridges and roads and runways. So what does this look like moving forward for us and the gateway for the port? So we looked at today what the baseline is for impacts from various weather on the cargo flow, and then projected where are we going in the next 30 years. And what are those things that we really need to concentrate on? It came up with 8 findings at the end of the study for wind and rain, sea level rise, temperature swings. And at the end of the project last year, when this atmospheric river hit BC, we added an 8th finding in terms of understanding these atmospheric river events. The last piece of our project was to understand resiliency currently, but also how can we adapt to where we know temperatures and wind and precipitation are going to go. We came up with this group that we've assembled with a number of next steps, from monitoring and prediction tools to planning and policy, general infrastructure improvement, to physical countermeasures to things like sea level rise. And that's a summary of our project.
Thanks so much, Jason. And as Jason said, we did have a chance to meet at the Green Marine event in Montreal and presented together on a panel. And I was so impressed with this study that I thought the rest of AAPA would love to hear about it. So I think this is a great example of the kind of work we'd love to do in the Powers program, and the kind of information that's really important for ports around the Americas to know about. So thank you so much for joining us, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Sure. In the spirit of collaboration between the public and the private sectors, next we're going to hear from Guy Warner, who is the chairman and CEO of Cordero Energy. Cordero Energy works with ports to implement microgrids and electrical engineering solutions. And Guy is going to speak about how microgrids can be used by ports to bolster their energy resilience and promote electrification of critical infrastructure. Please take it away, Guy.
Thanks, Ian, and it's a genuine honor to be with all of you this morning. My life work over the past 10 years or so has been to develop a new utility business model for electric power, one where most of the power is generated by on-site resources and distributed in local area networks called microgrids. I've done this in collaboration with the United States Conference of Mayors throughout the entire time, and more recently with the AAPA and the Naval Postgraduate School. I'll just describe some of the features of what we're doing. We're trying to standardize the electrical and institutional networking that's needed to efficiently develop microgrids and attract financing for same. In terms of the electrical networking, why we have a set pattern for verifying that new technologies are beyond proof of concept and ready to deploy, we're really focused on off-the-shelf technologies for hardware that have been proven in the field, and open source software for controlling all that. I'd represent to you that the electrical networking is pretty well in place, and there's not a lot of work to do. The IEEE certifies it on a particular job. The UL guarantees its performance, and we can see that in select areas of North America, particularly New York City, there's some very large microgrids there that have been operating for 35 years at half the cost of the utility, 5 times the reliability, and a 30% lower carbon footprint. And likewise, many, many more microgrids operating outside of the United States, which brings us to the institutional networking, which we believe that in our utility business model, the microgrids should be collectively planned and governed by consumers as a kind of infrastructural commons. We've also developed the chance for labor to invest in owning the microgrids that they build through their pension funds and life insurance companies, and we've gotten very good terms from them for that. The primary risk in institutional networking comes from trying to develop fair competition with the existing utility companies. That's changing now with some regulatory reforms. We do state regulation here. The United Kingdom does national regulation and has set a model for the ability of a microgrid to distribute power in competition with the utility that claims it has a franchise. So that model we're now doing to launch a proof of market project here in the District of Columbia, where we're headquarters, where we just got an order on June the 30th saying, yes, there can be competition, you can distribute power. And then we hope to come back to the utility company. After all, I'm very old, so I was actually a consulting economist when MCI started for Price Waterhouse. And I was there when they were there, and I'd observed that after an antitrust case, they prevailed. But right now, Verizon and, if I'm not mistaken, Verizon and AT&T are the two prominent companies with a new decentralized telecoms business model. And I think the utilities will eventually come around. But we are currently in a collaboration with the Naval Postgraduate School. So I'm pleased to announce that they have an applied microgrid laboratory there. And we're going to try to invite anyone who's interested, because we've been with the USCM for so long. Will be municipal officials, of course, through our mayor's contacts, but also we hope the AAPA might be interested in offering this to port officials. So it's a way of doing an applied course. In other words, you bring your data and we'll actually simulate a microgrid during the course. We intend that it will last for around 3 days. We're also establishing a microgrid enabling lab as part of our rollout of the new utility in the District of Columbia, in conglomeration with some think tanks here in DC and also think tanks worldwide that will contribute to teach applied microgrids there. And again, it's a place to come where you can find open source software and proven technology and then try to figure how to configure them for your particular project. So with that, I'll thank you again. It's a genuine pleasure to be with Mario and Carrie and Chris and Ian, who I met before, and to make new friends in this conference. And just contact me at any time. We have a knowledge base that's up and available on SharePoint if you're interested in seeing articles or discussions or best practices or anything like that. I'm more than happy to open that up.
Thank you, Guy. And as I said, Cordero Energy is an industry solution provider member of AAPA. So we'll certainly be collaborating with you a lot more going down the road, Guy.
All right, thanks.
So next is Jonathan Atwood, Chief of Staff and External Affairs of the South Jersey Port Corporation, which has done a lot of great work preparing for offshore wind development on the Atlantic coast. Port infrastructure is a critical piece in the mission to roll out offshore wind farms that will power millions of homes and businesses. And Jonathan is going to speak to how New Jersey is preparing for that challenge. Jonathan?
Thanks, Ian. Let me just try and share my screen here. Okay, great. And thanks, Ian. As Ian said, I'm Jonathan Atwood. I'm the Chief of Staff, External Affairs at South Jersey Port Corporation. We are a state authority here in New Jersey. Our port district covers seven counties along the Delaware River in southern New Jersey. Let's move on to the next slide here. Sorry. There we go. So we currently operate a little background on South Jersey Port, and then go into wind. We currently operate 4 marine terminals, 2 here in Camden, right across the river from Philadelphia, 1 further down the port of Paulsboro, and then we have a small port at the port of Salem. We're part of the Tri-State Delaware River Maritime Complex with the Port of Philadelphia. See my friend from Philport on here, as well as Delaware. Combined, the 3 states make up almost $80 billion in economic activity, support 191,000 jobs. So it's vitally important to the economy, not only just of New Jersey, but this entire region, the Delaware River. We are, New Jersey in particular is well positioned for offshore wind development, not only off the coast of New Jersey, but because of our access to surrounding states. The Biden administration in March of 21 recently designated New Jersey centric coastline. Actually, you'll see up from the New York Bight, sort of goes in that indentation there south of Long Island, all the way down to the tip of New Jersey. It's the nation's, the heart of the nation's offshore wind industry. It's a priority wind energy area. In his goal, the president's goal is 30,000 megawatts of offshore wind. Our governor here in New Jersey, Phil Murphy, has set a goal of 7,500 megawatts for offshore wind. And the Board of Public Utilities has already granted leases for 3 projects, Ocean Wind 1 to Ørsted, which is about 1,100 megawatts, Ocean Wind 2 and Atlantic Shores was a second award. Ocean Wind 2 was to Ørsted, and Atlantic Shores is a company backed by Shell. And all told, that is about 3,700 megawatts of offshore wind capacity. So there's a lot going on here. You know, it's sorry, technical difficulties here. There we go. In total, there's about 17, I think at last count, wind farms on the East Coast are either leased or leased with a financial backing, moving through permitting. And you'll see by this map how it sort of illustrates how centrally located New Jersey is to a number of these different leases, but also particularly our port in Paulsboro, which is PMT on this map, and our Salem port, which is SMT. The Delaware River, you know, we're less than 60 miles to sail to the President's Priority Wind Energy Area. You know, we in particular have at our facilities, you know, we have the available land and warehouse to support a number of these different initiatives, particularly at the Paulsboro Marine Terminal. We are, get into a little more about Paulsboro next. So the state of New Jersey has made a pretty significant commitment to offshore wind. Already spent $400 million on the development of the Paulsboro Marine Terminal. EEW is a commitment of $250 million. They are the company, they're partnering with Ørsted. They're developing the monopiles, essentially the tube platform that goes into the ground that the then wind turbines and blades are going to sit on top of. So they get dug or pounded down into the ground, and then the wind turbines sit on that. And they're sort of the platform for offshore wind. They're going to be built at our facility in Paulsboro. And the idea is not only just for the New Jersey projects, but for the projects all up and down the East Coast. Let's see if I have, sorry. Sorry, my computer is struggling here, I apologize. So for Paulsboro, phase 1 was completed in 2017. Phase 2 is scheduled to be completed later this year. And the idea is that EEW will be able to start importing some of the components for the monopiles later this year. And ultimately, the idea is to actually manufacture them entirely domestically. They will then put them on a barge and send them out.
We're hopeful.
Then in addition to Paulsboro Marine Terminal, we also have our Salem Marine Terminal, which we are developing. We were actually just recently awarded a $9 million infra grant from US DOT, developing that port through a multi-phased approach to be an O&M facility for both the port in Paulsboro, but also the port, the New Jersey Wind Port, which just further down the river in Lower Alloways Creek, as you can see on this map here. The New Jersey Windport is the nation's first purpose-built port. It is at the site of the Oyster Creek nuclear facility. As you can see, the state has made a pretty significant investment and commitment to offshore wind, not only the investment at Paulsboro, but also here at the New Jersey Windport, which is currently being run by the NJEDA. And its position relative to not only to the operations at Paulsboro and the operations off the coast of New Jersey, but is going to be well positioned to support the offshore wind efforts up and down the East Coast. Oh, excuse me. In addition to the offshore wind developments that we're working on, in partnership with Governor Murphy in the state of New Jersey, we've also made a commitment just internally to a number of environmental initiatives that I just wanted to mention. We currently replacing a number of our cargo handling equipment with electric through a number of different grants, 27 electric forklifts, electric rail car mover. I think the future obviously is to Tier 4 and electric. I think a number of these federal programs have been very helpful. We appreciate AAPA's support and commitment to the funding apparatus for these. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to take advantage while we can. We are also pursuing solar, for all of our roofs at both of our Camden terminals. We've initiated, sorry, I had something else and I can't get it to come up here, I apologize. Energy efficient LED lighting, and we're upgrading our underground water utilities to be, because frankly, as we've seen in the, as Gary was talking about, we were talking about at the beginning of this, just resiliency is becoming even more important in light of these economic or climate changes. Sorry. All right, sorry, I was trying to get something to pull up here and get it. So that, sort of concludes the brief talk. But the state of New Jersey has made a very significant commitment to offshore wind, not only just for meeting our own goals, but to support those of the president initiative in the states, from New York to Rhode Island, Maryland, Virginia, all up and down the East Coast, and have really positioned, New Jersey's, I think, gotten there, got out there early and made the commitment early. It's been a good 12, 15 years. A number of the leaders here have been working on this and position the state to be at the forefront of this industry. So thanks, Ian. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. To close it out, we have Ed Washburn, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for the PASHA Group. PASHA is rolling out vessels powered by liquefied natural gas to mitigate emissions and support American industry. And Ed is going to speak on PASHA's process in developing these new engineering solutions. Ed?
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this terrific group, and we fully support AAPA and the new Powers program. I'd like to share a couple of projects we're doing with this group, and I think everyone will find it exciting. We certainly think it is the correct path. We are advocates of LNG as a marine fuel. We do understand it's not a zero carbon fuel or zero emission fuel, but for commercial large ships with engines and like ours and 40,000 horsepower, it is the cleanest, best available fuel today. So LNG eliminates particulate matter just about 100%. It eliminates sulfur 99.9%. Sulfur is what, when it mixes with water, creates the acid rain. So eliminating sulfur is extremely important. It eliminates nitrous oxide by 90% and eliminates CO2 by up to 25%. So in the LNG space, we're building 2 new vessels. These vessels will be powered by LNG or diesel fuel. Our plan is to run these on LNG from day one. Ironically, or with great pride, we are doing our second bunkering in the Port of Brownsville today. We'll be taking on 400,000 gallons of LNG on our first ship, George 3, and we'll be taking delivery of that ship next week. That ship will be serving the communities of Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mario and his team at the Port of Long Beach for their unwavering support in bringing LNG bunkering to the Port of Long Beach. And as far as bunkering goes, we have developed a joint venture called West Coast Clean Fuels, and we're partnered with World Fuel Services and Clean Marine Energy. And West Coast Clean Fuels will be doing the bunkering for our new vessels. And we are also converting one vessel. This is the Horizon Reliance, which was a heavy fuel oil powered steamship to an LNG powered diesel ship. This is a dramatic reduction in emissions. And one thing is we're recycling a hull. So basically any emissions to build a ship, which is substantial, is eliminated in that process. So we're very proud of that. Also West Coast Clean Fuels, we were the first to permit and bunker hydrogen in maritime, and we've bunkered the ferry sea change in the Northwest of the United States. Additionally, on our terminal side, working with California Resources Board and currently now with MARAD in a cooperative agreement at our steel terminal in Wilmington, we are setting it up to operate without the grid. So basically, we're going to modify our crane. So as we drop a load, it'll regenerate electricity. We have a 2.2 megawatt battery storage system that'll accept that electricity. We also are putting in a 1 megawatt solar panels that'll feed the batteries or the grid. And also we have a advanced wind wall, which is basically like a box fan with very small turbines in it, and we'll get wind power and also feed the batteries or the grid. We're fortunate enough, net metering is allowed there. So as we produce more than we're using, we can feed back to the grid. That is just an excellent project, and it's well underway and will be finished this year by the end of 2023. We recently have applied for a PIDP grant for our new terminal, Kapalama Container Terminal in Hawaii. And it is basically the exact same thing as the Wilmington terminal, but we're adding a natural gas generator and in a much larger scale. And that would be set up to operate without the grid to discharge and load our new ship, which is a 1200 FEU ship. The Wilmington terminal will be able to work on the battery power 2 8-hour shifts with 2 cranes. So we're very proud of that. I think it's extremely interesting. It's not easy, but it's certainly possible. And again, thank you to this group for allowing me to share those projects. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ed. And thank you to all of our presenters for those fascinating presentations. Before we open it up to questions, and AAPA staff, we are going to stay on the line here until 12:30 Eastern time to answer questions and have a discussion. Before we do that, we wanted to give you all a quick overview of the Powers Program Launch webpage, which my colleague Imani will share here in a second. You can read the full Powers policy platform on this webpage, along with several documents with policy summaries, information about funding opportunities, advocacy letters, results of an AAPA a survey AAPA conducted through our Environment Committee, and links to register for the annual convention and Powers Summit. I want to give a particular shout out to that survey and thank my colleagues on the Environment Committee, Gretchen Breyer, Charles Liu, and Jason Jordan. We did a lot of great work through that committee to gather some really interesting data I think you'll all be interested in. There's a link to that, the results on this page. We'll be updating this page as we get to work researching and advocating for these issues. Now we're going to open it up for questions for AAPA staff and our speakers today as they're available to stay on the call. Please raise your virtual hand or type in the chat box if you have a question or ideas for how your port or company can collaborate with AAPA and the Powers program. See, we have one question in the chat here from Terry Griffiths. Thank you, Terry. She asks, what can the federal government do to support the port industry in addressing these challenges? It's a great question, Terry. And I think the main focus of this program in translating to federal policymakers what resources and technologies are needed from ports. The bipartisan infrastructure law was certainly a great start in getting more resources to ports. There's certainly a need for even more. We've shown through one survey we've done that ports have $50 billion worth of green infrastructure projects that they're ready to build over the next decade if sufficient funding were available. There's a couple pieces of legislation we've advocated for, including the Hydrogen for Ports Act, that would create a grant program for ports to build out hydrogen and alternative fuel infrastructure. There was also in congressional reconciliation legislation, a $3.5 billion port electrification grant program that passed through the House of Representatives that would have created this entirely new stream of funding for ports to implement electrification projects. So those are just two examples of the types of legislation we have advocated for and will continue to do. And I'd invite Mario, if you'd like to add anything on to that, please, and same to Chris Connor.
I think you nailed it. I can't do any better than what you said there. That was spot on.
I agree, Chris. I think, Ian, you covered all the bases.
Hey, and it's Guy Warner. I have some specific stuff we're working on the Fed side. There's DOE and DOD have done a poorer job in microgrids than they did in telecom setting standards. But I think that's all changing with the infrastructure bill. I think they're going to see them try to set standards for their facilities. So I think that's worth monitoring. In terms of specific grants, FEMA has just announced a grant for a big microgrid in the District of Columbia at the old St. Elizabeth's campus. That's going to be the first project that try to set a standard. We're hoping to build it. We're going to compete to build it, but it's a $15 million grant, so it's a pretty good sized grant. And again, they're trying to set the standard where they start to do this in numerous cities. So FEMA is looking for resiliency to set more microgrids in selected cities. Yeah, I think that's where we're crisscrossing with the feds on standards for DOE and DOD, and on again, we're at the Naval Postgraduate School, so we have to work with the Navy on that, and then with the specific grants from FEMA.
Great, thank you, Guy. And we have another question in the chat that I think you might be able to answer from Alvaro Zayas. Are there examples of successful microgrid projects in areas where space is limited? So projects that would have a small footprint.
Yeah, the answer is yes. The projects end up, if you email me, I'll send you the details on them. But the ones that come to mind immediately are in New York City. So generally what's being used in tight spaces is to build these on top of weight-bearing roofs. Parking garages would be a classical place where the roof's not being used for anything else anyway. Gets it above the water level, so it makes it more resilient. Also, these kinds of microgrids, the generators and the control equipment are stackable. So New York City's had these very large housing developments, have been off grid for 35 years. Kennedy Airport has one now, which is a central plant, so it's not space consistent, but they're in the process of trying to figure out how to shoehorn in a new system because theirs is aged. And so that's one to follow. But yeah, generally there's ways to do this. And then also the amount of noise and pollution control is variable. I mean, you can control it to the extent of whatever the consumer would like and the regulator would like. So yeah, I think there's a whole bunch worldwide too. Copenhagen, most of its power comes from consumer-owned microgrids in urban settings. And so again, if you email me, I can send you case studies on this stuff.
Thanks so much, Guy. Next question from Elizabeth Neely was, what are some more specific APA issues and focuses for the state of California? And I think just the way I'd respond to that is, obviously we have a great number of Californian ports as members of AAPA, and we have ports on the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, Great Lakes, and some inland river ports as well. So our goal in this program is really to try to reach a consensus, among the different regions of the country, see what policies ports across the country can all agree on, while recognizing that there are going to be some differences among the different regions and different states. So certainly we're going to get to work in recognizing what the different needs are of different regions of the country, and trying to craft some policy solutions that fit those different regions. We have a saying that I've heard over and over again: if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. We know that all ports are different and have different needs. I'll move on to the next question, unless unless Mario would like to weigh in, being from California. Okay. The next question was from Anshu Singh. Are there electrification project grants? Are those grants only for seaports or for inland river ports as well? It's a great question. We do have a few inland river ports in AAPA, and we're happy that we're kind of expanding into that space. The Port Infrastructure Development Program this year, for the first time, can now be spent on electrification projects. So there's the funding for that program has almost tripled in size. So there's a lot of resources available for inland river ports, and those grants can be spent on electrification projects. The legislation I mentioned, this $3.5 billion port electrification grant program, we're still advocating for the passage of that, and it would be available for inland river ports as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, from Joe Riccio, conversion to greener energy will not happen if the federal government does not approve the wind farms. Only 2 have had their operations and construction plans been approved. We have been waiting for over a year with no solution in sight. What will happen when the larger wind farms get closer to submittal to the federal government? That is a great question, and I'd love to hear Jonathan's take on it. I know even in this call, folks who weren't presenters probably have some insights on this as well. So I'd invite Jonathan to answer that question if you have some thoughts, and for others to speak up as well.
Well, I'd love to be able to predict what the federal government's going to do. Though if I could do that, I'd be in a different job for sure. I know that BOEM just had its first public hearing on Ocean Wind 1, which is the first lease here in New Jersey. We just had that late last week, actually. I don't know if I don't know what the alternative is if these don't get approved. I would have to check. Because some of these are in state water and some are in federal water, right? Ocean Wind 1 is actually a state lease, but I guess it's far out enough that it's partially in federal water. It's a good question, honestly. It is a good question, and obviously, should there be a change in leadership federal government, then some of these priorities shift. I think that's the risk of any of these government-backed projects. I don't know what the solution is, to be honest with you. That's something I think that certainly needs to be looked at. I'd have to go back and check, but it's a fair question.
I mean, we hear that, there continues to be a shortage of employees at BOEM and other agencies that may have to weigh in on this. So I get that, but we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. So, I mean, why doesn't the federal government farm it out to consulting and, consulting company or something like that? If this is such a priority, I mean, 2 small wind farms here in New England, and there's 8 more behind it in New England alone. And you saw the map that Jonathan provided. And like I said, what's going to happen when New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia come, get theirs approved? It's a multi-step process, and we're waiting for this operations and construction permit to be approved for Orsted, and it's just not. That just doesn't seem to be happening. And, I think they have a good relationship with BOEM. They have one small one already approved. So don't know. It's a mystery to all of us.
No, it's a good point.
It's a mystery to the industry.
Especially with an administration that is fully committed to offshore wind. Who knows what happens. The next administration is not. It's a good point.
And just one point I would add, I went to a really interesting event last week at the office of the Bipartisan Policy Center and heard from the director of the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, which I learned is a newly permanently authorized federal agency with the goal of kind of streamlining some of these permits. And they talked a lot about offshore wind. So I'm sure there's obviously still a lot of work to do. But I think that's one policy area where this program is going to be very active in trying to, especially for projects, our goal is to, try to make sure ports can play a role in the development of offshore wind, and getting some of those projects permitted is a major necessary part of that.
Yeah, I think, Ian, Joe, your question in some ways, you're defining, at least in part, a part of our mission is to help take away some of the bureaucracy and speed things up. It's not unlike some of the challenges we have with grant programs like PIDP, like funding to completion with Army Corps of Engineers. It's getting the money in the ground and working rather than just authorized or appropriated. So I think you're helping define a little bit of the role, partly anyhow.
Yeah. I ran into a former BOEM employee at a offshore wind function, surprise, and their comment was, well, they just sold these leases or collected billions of dollars in revenue from the sale of these leases. So there's, I don't know, they should put it back and prime the pump and get these things going.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the map, it's daunting. And if you want to, the country needs to be, fossil fuel, off of fossil fuels in the next 15 years. It doesn't look it's going to be that easy. So that's our view from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
In a minute, if anybody has any other questions, please just raise your hand or speak up. But otherwise, I think we've had a great little discussion here, following some great presentations. If we don't have any other questions, I think we can reach our conclusion here. And I just want to thank all of our speakers and everyone who took some time out of your day to join us for the launch of the Port Opportunities with Energy, Resilience, and Sustainability program. We're just getting started. So if you have ideas for how we can work together to achieve the policy goals we've talked about today, whether you're an AAPA member supply chain partner company, policymaker, or you're just interested, please reach out. My email address is igansler@aapa-ports.org. So we're really looking forward to working with you all going forward, and especially looking forward to seeing you in October in Orlando and January at Port Tampa Bay. Please have a great day. Thank you for joining today, and we'll be talking down the road. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.